Seth Rollins is standing at a crossroads that could define not just his legacy, but the entire trajectory of WWE's next era. And honestly, it's infuriating how perfectly positioned he is to execute what might be the most compelling revenge storyline in modern wrestling history. Yet there's this nagging concern that creative might fumble something so obviously brilliant. The man tore his ACL and MCL back in the day, came back stronger, proved himself as a legitimate main event talent after the Shield split, and now he's dealing with another major setback that forced him to vacate the World Heavyweight Championship right after gaining massive momentum with a victory over Cody Rhodes at Crown Jewel. This isn't just about one wrestler getting injured, this is about a carefully constructed narrative that was building towards something significant, with the Vision faction suddenly getting cut off at the knees. And somehow WWE needs to turn this disaster into the kind of storyline that people will reference for years. The Vision turning on Rollins was the logical move to write him off television while he deals with his shoulder injury. But what happens next is absolutely critical, because this isn't just about bringing back another wrestler from injury, this is about crafting a return that justifies the months of absence and builds toward multiple pay-per-view moments that could legitimately reshape the upper card. Bronson Reed beating Roman Reigns is a massive statement that WWE is serious about elevating this guy. And Braun Breaker has been earmarked as a future world champion since his NXT days, so the Vision without Rollins needs to become an even more dangerous force that terrorizes the roster while he's gone. The frustrating part is that WWE has all the pieces to make this work spectacularly, but history shows they can just as easily squander potential when they lose focus or get distracted by whatever shiny new idea catches their attention in the moment. Bringing Brock Lesnar into the Vision as an unofficial leader sounds counterintuitive at first, because Lesnar has never really been a faction guy. But think about the logic here for a second, because this isn't about making Lesnar the focus, it's about using his monstrous credibility to legitimize Reed, Breaker, and potentially Austin Theory as genuine main event threats. Lesnar doesn't need to appear every single week, he just needs to be this looming presence that makes the Vision feel unstoppable, and his limited appearances between major events would actually enhance the aura rather than diminish it, because scarcity creates value in wrestling. The key is using Lesnar specifically to elevate younger talent, rather than having him dominate everything the way he's done in previous runs. And if Paul Heyman is managing this group, then you've got the perfect mouthpiece to build tension between Lesnar and the younger guys who are hungry to prove they don't need the Beast incarnate to succeed. The inevitable betrayal where Braun Breaker and the Vision turn on Lesnar writes itself, because it's the third time Heyman would be involved in someone turning on Brock, which makes Lesnar look somewhat foolish for trusting him again, but also sets up this massive moment where Breaker cements himself by taking down one of the most dominant forces in WWE history. A Breaker versus Lesnar match at WrestleMania doesn't need to be a technical masterpiece or go 30 minutes. It just needs to be 10 minutes of absolute chaos where two massive human beings destroy everything in sight, and Breaker walks out with a clean victory that immediately establishes him as a top-tier player. Look at what Lesnar and Goldberg did at WrestleMania when they had that incredibly short match that people still talk about because it was just non-stop intensity and violence, proving that match length has absolutely nothing to do with impact or memorability when the storytelling and execution are tight. Some people will complain about Lesnar being a part-timer who swoops in for big moments, then disappears, but that criticism misses the entire point of what his role would be in this scenario, because he's not there to be the champion or the focal point. He's there to be the stepping stone that makes someone else's career trajectory skyrocket. Sami Zayn's recent United States Championship run proved that you don't need extended reigns to make a title or a wrestler feel important. You just need to use the time effectively with meaningful matches and storylines that elevate everyone involved. Lesnar being with the Vision for just a few months leading into WrestleMania accomplishes everything necessary to set up the next phase, and his presence alone adds legitimacy to Reed and Breaker that they couldn't get any other way, because beating Brock Lesnar still means something even in an era where he's not around constantly. After the Vision destroys Lesnar following their WrestleMania betrayal, carting him off in an ambulance after a vicious 3-on-1 assault, that's when Rollins makes his return, and it needs to be explosive, dramatic, and completely unexpected, even though everyone knows he's eventually coming back. The timing matters enormously because if Rollins returns too early, it undermines the severity of his injury. But if he waits too long, the storyline loses momentum, and fans move on to whatever else is happening. So hitting that sweet spot around summer when the Vision is at their absolute peak creates the perfect storm for his comeback. Rollins preventing Braun Breaker from capturing a championship opportunity or advancing in a #1 contender tournament immediately re-establishes what this is actually about, which is Rollins getting revenge on the people who took everything from him when he was at the top of his game. The revenge tour that follows has to be methodical and brutal because Rollins can't just come back and immediately overcome the Vision's numbers advantage. He needs to outsmart them, pick them off when opportunities arise, and show that his time away made him more dangerous and focused rather than weakened. This is where WWE Creative needs to resist the temptation to have Rollins win every encounter, because tension comes from adversity. And watching Rollins struggle against 3 younger, hungry competitors who are determined to put him back on the shelf permanently creates genuine drama that keeps people invested week after week. The faction has been using their numerical superiority to dominate everyone on the roster, so Rollins finding ways to even those odds through strategy rather than just overpowering them adds layers to his character and makes the eventual payoff that much more satisfying. SummerSlam becomes the natural climax point where Rollins needs backup, and the absolute last person anyone expects to team with him is Brock Lesnar, creating this enemy of my enemy alliance that makes perfect sense within the story, because both men have been brutalized by the Vision and both want revenge. A tables, ladders and chairs match between Rollins and Lesnar against Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed at the biggest show of the summer is the kind of spectacle that sells itself, and the match structure allows for insane spots that showcase everyone's strengths while building toward that moment where the former rivals overcome their differences to destroy the Vision. The key detail is that Breaker doesn't take the pin in this match, which allows him to save face despite the loss and sets up an extended series between him and Rollins that can carry into the fall and beyond, because their story isn't finished just because they lost one tag match. Paul Heyman revealing after the fact that he orchestrated both betrayals against Rollins and Lesnar is classic Heyman manipulation that adds another dimension to everything that happened, because suddenly you realize this wasn't just the Vision acting on their own ambition, there was a puppet master pulling strings the entire time. Whether Heyman is telling the truth or just trying to insert himself back into the situation doesn't really matter, because his character is inherently untrustworthy and manipulative. So the ambiguity actually works in the story's favor by keeping people guessing about who really made the decisions and when. Heyman claiming he acted indifferent when the Vision turned on him initially because he didn't want to reveal his true intentions is exactly the kind of revisionist history his character would engage in, and it gives him a way back into the main event picture without diminishing what the Vision accomplished on their own. The extended feud between Rollins and Breaker that carries into late in the year becomes the vehicle for both men to showcase different aspects of their characters, with Rollins as the veteran babyface fighting for redemption and revenge, while Breaker is the young lion trying to prove he belongs at the absolute top of the card without any qualifiers or asterisks. These kinds of series allow for different match types and stipulations that keep things fresh, and supporting characters like Becky Lynch on Rollins' side create opportunities for mixed tag situations or just additional storyline wrinkles that give the feud more depth. The entire purpose of this extended narrative is building toward Breaker eventually getting that signature victory over Rollins that establishes him as a made man in the main event scene, but rushing to that conclusion defeats the purpose, because the journey is what makes the destination meaningful. Critics might argue that focusing so much on Rollins' comeback is dwelling on the past when WWE should be pushing exclusively toward the future, but that perspective completely misunderstands how wrestling storytelling actually works, because you need established established stars to create new stars through compelling interactions that make fans care about the next generation. Rollins going through this entire revenge arc isn't about keeping him in the spotlight forever. It's about using his credibility and fan connection to transfer that equity to Reed, Breakker, and Theory, so that when they eventually move past him, they do so as legitimate main eventers, rather than just guys who won some matches. The cyclical nature of WWE means that today's returning babyface becomes tomorrow's established veteran, who puts over the next wave. And Rollins is at exactly the right point in his career to play that role, while still being young enough and talented enough to have incredible matches that justify his position. The Vision as a unit needs significant development during Rollins' absence, because they can't just be generic bad guys who team up to beat people down. They need identities and motivations that make sense beyond just wanting to hurt Seth Rollins. Bronson Reed's victory over Roman Reigns is the kind of statement win that changes perception immediately, and WWE needs to build on that momentum by having Reed look like an absolute monster who could challenge for any title at any time. Braun Breakker is already being positioned as this once-in-a-generation athlete who combines size, speed, and technical ability in ways that most big men simply cannot, so giving him meaningful feuds and victories while Rollins is out maintains his trajectory rather than putting everything on hold waiting for the return. The success of this entire plan depends on WWE creative committing to the long-term vision rather than making reactive changes every time something doesn't immediately generate the exact response they wanted. Wrestling fans are sophisticated enough now to recognize when companies are building towards something substantial, and they're willing to be patient if they trust that the payoff will be worth the wait. The Vision, as a dominant faction during Rollins' absence, his eventual return and team up with Lesnar, the extended Rollins vs. Breakker program, and the eventual fracturing of the Vision represents months of interconnected storytelling that creates multiple stars while giving fans numerous payoff moments along the way. That's exactly the kind of ambitious booking that modern WWE should be doing with their depth of talent, and Rollins' injury situation provides the perfect excuse to launch into that kind of sustained narrative that pays dividends for years to come.